I've been seeing couples long enough to know that sometimes they come in hoping you'll fix things, when really they just want someone to confirm what they already know. They sit there all pent up, frustrated, and sideways glances, waiting for me to choose sides. Spoiler alert, that never works. But when Brian and Jess walked into my office, I knew they were different. And by office, because I think most people know I don't have an office, I'm talking about Zoom. All right. Not in the quote unquote, they're perfect together kind of way, but in the this is going to take some work kind of way. Brian plopped down like a man defeated, while Jess sat on the edge, her arms tightly crossed, a wall between them before either of them said a word. So I began breaking the ice. What brings you guys here? Brian spoke first, which didn't surprise me. She's not happy. She thinks I don't know. She thinks I don't care anymore. Jess scoffed. It's not about thinking, Brian. It's about knowing. You don't try anymore. You don't put in the effort. I feel like I'm carrying this relationship on my back and you're just along for the ride. Here we go. I glanced at Brian, whose jaw tightened. That's not fair, Jess. I am working. I'm keeping the lights on. That's effort, isn't it? Jess didn't miss a beat. Oh, yeah, working your 60-hour weeks and then coming home to collapse on the couch. Real romantic. Meanwhile, I'm handling the kids, the house, the bills, everything. And when I ask for a little help, you act like I'm being unreasonable. Brian sighed, rubbing his temples like he was already over this conversation. It's not like that. You're just better at that stuff than I am. Oh my gosh, that's dangerous territory there. You always take charge. So I figured you'd rather do it. And that's your excuse? Just snapped. I take charge because if I didn't, nothing would get done. You don't offer, you don't ask, you don't even see it. Now, this was familiar territory. I'd heard versions of the story more times than I could count. One partner over functioning and the other checked out. The result, resentment, festering like an open wound. But something about Jess and Brian felt different. Like they both wanted something more than just validation. They wanted to fix it. I just had to help them see how. Okay, I said, holding up a hand to slow the rapid fire accusations. Let's hit pause for a second. Jess, you're feeling like the relationship is lopsided. You're carrying too much weight, and Brian's not pulling his share. Is that right? Jess nodded, her lips pressed into a tight line. Brian looked ready to defend himself, but I held up a hand again. And Brian, you feel like you're contributing by working, but maybe you're missing what Jess needs from you outside of that. Brian hesitated before giving a slow nod. Yeah, I guess. So we have a situation where both of you are contributing, but not in a way that feels balanced or recognized by the other. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound fair? They both nodded, though Jess still looked skeptical. What I'm hearing, I continued, is that you're not sharing the responsibility for the relationship's growth. Jess, you've been holding most of it while Brian has been focusing on other aspects, but the relationship needs both of you fully engaged in different ways. Jess shifted in her seat, uncrossing her arms slightly. But how am I supposed to know he even cares? It's like I'm talking to a wall sometimes. Brian sighed, staring at the floor. It's not that I don't care. I don't know how to fix it. I leaned forward, keeping my tone calm but direct. That's the thing, Brian. It's not about fixing it. It's about showing up consistently. Relationships don't run on autopilot. They need fuel from both people. When was the last time you asked Jess how she was feeling or offered to help with something around the house without her asking? He blinked at me, clearly struggling to remember. I don't know. I guess it's been a while. Jess snorted. Try never. I turned to her and Jess, have you told Brian what you need from him specifically? Not just a frustration, but in a way that makes it clear what would make you feel supported. She opened her mouth, but stopped short, considering the question. I mean, I thought it was obvious. It might be obvious to you, I said gently, but maybe Brian needs not clever, clearer signals. He's not inside your head after all. She huffed, but her expression softened. Yeah, okay, maybe I could be better at that. I could see we're getting somewhere, but I wanted to push them a little further. Here's what we're going to do. You're both going to make a list of things you need from each other to feel like this relationship is more balanced. Not just chores or tasks, but emotional support too. Then we're going to compare. Brian looked skeptical. A list? A list, I repeated. You'll be surprised what you learn when you write things down. Reluctantly, they both started jotting things down. After a few minutes, Jeff just spoke first. Okay, I need help with the kids. For one, I need more emotional support. Like if I'm having a bad day, don't just say you'll get through it and move on. And I want to feel like we're a team again, not like I'm handling everything on my own. Brian was staring at his list like it was a cryptic message from another planet. I wrote, I guess, I just want some appreciation for the work I do. Like I'm busting my ass and I don't feel like it matters to anyone. And I want you to tell me what you need before it becomes a huge fight. I couldn't help but to smile a little. The lists were predictable, but that wasn't the twist. Jess stared at Brian for a beat, then said, you want appreciation, Brian? I haven't felt appreciated in years. You don't even notice when I do things. I can't believe you're sitting there asking for praise. And here's where the twist comes in. Brian set his list down, rubbing his temples like the weight of it all was suddenly pressing down on him. And then he spoke, and I swear his voice cracked. Jess, it's not that I don't notice. It's that I don't know how to show you I notice. My dad wasn't exactly a role model for this stuff. He worked, he came home, he sat on the couch. That's what I know. I'm not saying it's right, but it's all I've ever seen. I thought if I was doing my part, working, paying the bills, that was enough. But I'm starting to get that it's not. Just went quiet, really hearing him for the first time since they walked in. I didn't know you felt that way. Well, Brian muttered, you didn't ask. We sat in silence for a moment, letting that sink in. The truth of it was, they were both waiting for the other to step up, both assuming the other didn't care because neither had asked for what they needed before things got bad. I said finally, it sounds like you have both been carrying different loads, but neither of you is seeing what the other is bringing to the table. This is where sharing the responsibility for the relationship's growth comes in. It's not just about who does chores or who works the longest hours. It's about showing up emotionally, checking in with each other, and making sure that you're both moving forward together. Brian looked up, his face softening. So what do we do now? Jess sighed, her tone lighter than before. I guess we start by talking to each other more, and I'll try to tell you what I need before I explode. Brian nodded, and I'll try to actually listen when you do. It wasn't an overnight fix, but it was a start. They left my office that day with a little less weight on their shoulders, knowing that this wasn't about one person carrying the whole thing. It was about both of them holding up their half of the sky, side by side. And it wasn't that they suddenly became perfect partners or that everything magically fell into place. It was simpler than that. They realized they were fighting the same fight, just from the opposite corners. And once they saw that, they started fighting together instead of against each other. That's the real magic of sharing responsibility in a relationship. It's not about splitting everything 50-50. It's about realizing You're on the same team, even when the scoreboard looks a little lopsided. So I wanted to share this story because not only is it common, but also, someone who grew up in a very kind of traditional, um, the man goes out and works, comes home. The woman is the caretaker, homemaker, laundry, dishes, meals. Um, I grew up watching that. I grew up where I thought that was the norm. And I think these days that's an old blueprint. It doesn't work for most people. And listen, if it works for you, great, because it's not about the actual roles, right? It's not about the gendered roles. If you're okay with that, great. It's more about your truth and what empowers you. But it's about creating something that is unique to you and your partner. It's about creating spaces where people feel heard and appreciated and valued, And so this is kind of a common thing where couples who are kind of trying to trace an older blueprint with traditional role models, and then feeling unheard and alone and underappreciated in relationships. And my thing is, what would it look like to co-create? And by co-creating, I mean starting over, blank canvas, and redefining everything. What works for you. Kind of like throwing the old frame of what a relationship looks like out the window, creating something that is new without stains from previous generations, and whatever works for you and your partner. And with in these days, it's all about customization, so it could be anything, right? So whether we're talking about a redistribution of chores at home, or different relationship models, whatever works for you and your partner, I think co-creating, whatever feels aligned. Anyway, thank you for listening. Be well. I'll share more client stories. I'm writing a new book, and I'm scattering them in my book. And so this will be a series. And also just wanted to remind you, Single on Purpose, the app, where I'm creating a safe place for people who hate swiping. Is basically every single I know who hates swiping. It's going to be a space for you to kind of connect to yourself first, and then also meet other like-minded singles. Thank you for listening. Be well.